approach the point of the elephant in the room, so to speak, the cost, the prices of Yemeni coffee. Now, we all know that the yields are low, the logistics are very difficult, it's a troubled political scenario, a lot of instability, and the coffee's great, but it comes at a price. And at the end of the day, we are not doing our job at Sheba for our farmer partners if we can't return to them the equity that we need to. So we have to find a landing place for our coffee in the market. And obviously there are various tools and different marketing strategies. But before we get down to those deeper considerations, let me just throw the grenade into the room, as our former Dominic Cummings, advisor to the Prime Minister, would say. What about the prices, gentlemen? And I'm going to start with you, John, because you know you're a North Country man like me. You know the value of a pound, and you've also worked very closely with some of the multiples, and you have your origins at Taylor's. It's a big price ticket, right?
It is, and I think, sort of beyond everything, I think what any producer, whether it's coffee or any other product, or if you're a coffee roaster, all you want is a sustainable business. And I think that sort of underlying everything, if the price of Yemeni coffee is the price of Yemeni coffee, then the market needs to understand that. And I think sort of probably complicating that point and factor is that sort of we live in a world where the price of coffee is probably too cheap, and we've wrestled for decades over whether or not coffee, and particularly value-added coffee, whether that's value-added in terms of its cup profile, or probably more important in terms of the people and the relationship and the visibility and traceability behind coffee, is that with that value-added, well, what is the price to that? And I think because coffee has been so commodity driven, and because specialty coffee is tried for decades to try and break the commodity model, to try and break pricing models, that it's still held back, anchored a little bit by that. And I think the Yemeni coffee, as it's emerged in terms of better visibility over the last decade or so, it's maybe not been held back by that sort of more traditional commodity pricing model. And another question is actually, is the price of Yemeni coffee closer to where the price of true specialty coffee could potentially get to, or should be closer to anyway? At a consumer level, we've seen big price inflation as well. If I look at kind of the price of retail coffee in the UK, even a few years ago, sort of £4, I guess what, about $6 for a bag of coffee was seen as pretty much the ceiling for coffee as well. But if you go into specialty roasters now, or go online, and you can I think £10 for a bag, or I guess what, about $13-14 is a very common price point. So like, I think that sort of the consumer is willing to pay coffee. They're willing to pay for coffee that they perceive as higher value. And I think that sort of, as well as that conversation about what is the price of Yemeni coffee, and I think sort of making sure that it is sustainable, that it's price added value for the producer, and the producer can invest and develop their product as they want. We have to then throw that question back to the rest of the coffee world and say, is your product undervalued? And I think that it's a wider conversation that continues to persist around coffee. Is the pricing and traceability and transparency is a question we're always asking, and we don't necessarily ask it for other products. I know, sort of, John, you're very interested in wine, and these aren't discussions that we have around wine, because wine managed to break a commodity model in the 1800s, and we've not done that in coffee.
I think you're shining a light on some very important points there, John. Thank you. And really what you're talking about is the potential to level up, which is very fashionable at the moment in the developed world with the precariat, and that is to raise the profile and the status of certain occupations. And in a global context, surely that is artisanal coffee producers. Turning to you now, Alan. I mean, I'm from a commodities background, and if you look at wheat, look at maize, you look at barley, soya, they're all grown in certain latitudes of very wealthy exporters. And these are animal proteins for vegetable proteins for animals, I should say, as well as human consumption in the food chain. They have very powerful farming lobbies. They're able to influence export prices and dictate to the downstream processing and distribution system in a way that coffee farmers can't. You tend to think of big brands, multinationals. Yes, in Brazil there are large farming estates, sophisticated, educated people with networks. But you know, Alan, when you think of Yemen or Ethiopia, most of the people have no access to the outside world. They rely upon people like ourselves advocating and promoting and recognizing values. And hopefully the audience sees the quality and is willing to put its hand in its pocket to support that and give, as John said, a fair value for a low yield, difficult to produce product for a small unit that's really undercapitalized. So, Alan, what do you think about the price of Yemeni coffee? You see it lined up against others, Panama, some of the Colombian coffees, some perhaps of the top Ethiopians. Where do you see it at the moment, and how is it going to progress, do you think?
I think that it is right where it should be, or kind of at the price that it has at the moment reflects what it is on the market. So if we look at Yemen, definitely it is a small coffee producer. So we know that the prices are on the market are dictated by supply and demand, right? So being so hard to outsource Yemeni coffees, obviously that, people are willing to pay a higher price. That's one of the things. Second of all, if we look at other coffee producers like Brazil, just for an example, where you have irrigations and where you have mechanized aid and machineries there to simplify the work, that's one thing. And then obviously the price will be adjusted accordingly. While obviously in Yemen, the amount of labor that it is required to produce a lot of coffee, it's way higher, and the lack of resources makes everything more complicated, and this needs to be reflected in the price. So yeah, and again, there is the social economic impact that the green coffee buyer has to make in the community to make the coffee farmer want to go back and reinvest money and effort into another year of coffee crops and coffee farm rather than switching to something else. So obviously there are so many factors to take into consideration. And generally speaking, as I said, Yemen being a small coffee producer, it's quite an exotic presence on the coffee market, and that justifies the price that it has. So the question is not if it's a high price, the question is if it's still a fair price for what it is, considering the conditions that are present in Yemen and how hard it is to outsource such type of coffee. Yeah, basically the price is not high because we cannot compare a certain context with a completely different context. So we have to take the price with the context that produces that price. And if we look at Kapi Luwak, for an instance, right, it is a very expensive coffee, and for different reasons, but one of the main reasons is because it's so hard to outsource it, isn't it? So that dictates that high price that the coffee luwak has. And as well here with Yemeni coffees, they are high quality coffees. As John said, I never had a Yemen on the table that would have a defect, and that says a lot about the quality. They are quite hard to find because some lots are so small. We are talking about micro lots of only 10, 15 kilos from a farmer. So yeah, everything put together explains why the prices are where they are. And again, what I would ask is this price enough for outsourcing and sustaining the coffee production in Yemen?
Thank you very much for that. Now, Marty, you're looking at things partly through the prism of what's going on in Yunnan, the Asian economy, which is growing very rapidly. There's a lot of new middle class, high discretionary spending power. People are traveling. How do you see in the specialty zone in Asia, the Yemeni landing successfully? Price, quality, as a luxury product, how does it fit in?
Yeah, I think I look at the price from a little bit different perspective. Not that the cost of sourcing the coffee shouldn't be considered, or the cost of production, it must be considered, but the truth is most consumers won't consider that. Most consumers, not because they're evil or because they hate Yemenis or they hate Guatemalans or they hate anyone, but simply because that's not a part of their thought process when deciding on what to buy. Was this garment sewed in Bangladesh or in France? These things have different costs of production, but I think the main way that you can support the cost of or the price of a coffee is that the quality in the cup. If it's really good coffee, even if it was free, it should be able to garner a high price. And if it was really bad coffee, even if it was really expensive to make, then it probably won't be able to get a good price. And so to me, I came from a nonprofit background and then started working in for-profit industry and realized both of these things are needed. But if we're going to see sustainable development in Yemen, in Yunnan, in any producing country, we have to find a way to improve the quality of the product and make it worth it, to where when people buy, they're not saying, I'm buying this coffee because I'm a good guy and I feel bad for people, but I'm buying it because it's really worth that. And it being worth it can be a whole lot of things, but I think in the market, what's going to make it worth it is cup quality and uniqueness. And for sure, supply and demand will definitely play a role. And then obviously marketing will play a role. I think the Panamanian coffees are excellent, but would I pay, thousands of dollars a pound? Probably I wouldn't. Probably I couldn't. But even if I were financially able to do so, I probably still wouldn't, because they're not that good to me. But I'm excited that these prices exist. I'm excited that overall the ceiling for what coffee could be is growing. And I think that's really important for the industry. In 2013 and 14, we started talking about Yemeni coffee. The other expensive coffees on the market were Kopi Luwak and Blue Mountain, which were not expensive due to a particularly unique flavor profile. They're just expensive because they're expensive, and no one could figure out why. And it was a hard pill to swallow to say, oh, this coffee is $20, $30 a pound or sometimes even a kilo. It's really, now seeing the prices that are going on at auctions for wild, crazy things that taste like soy sauce and just some really ridiculous coffees making incredibly high sell prices. Yemeni coffee all of a sudden doesn't seem that outrageous anymore, but it has to be good. So we have to, I think, if we're thinking about it from a marketing perspective, we have to find a way to improve the quality. If we're thinking about it from a sustainability perspective, we have to find a sales outlet for the coffees that aren't that good, that aren't outrageously priced, but you're not gonna lose your shirt or lose the farm because they're selling so low, that the person who's producing them is losing every year, because obviously they won't continue to grow. I work with farmers every day, and it's a pretty straightforward proposition. It's like, if I grow this and make money, I'll keep growing it. And if I grow this and lose money, I'll stop growing it and try to grow something else. And so we have to find a way to definitely sustain production. But if we can improve quality and improve market access to that quality, I don't think Yemeni coffees are that expensive. And I'm super cheap. I'm for sure the cheapest guy on the call, and probably the cheapest guy that is involved in Yemeni coffee anywhere in the world. But I really think it's worth it because it's that good. It's so interesting and so unique and so special that you go, yeah, I'm totally willing to pay a much higher price than a comparable coffee from another region, because it's not really that comparable. It's really that interesting and unique.
So if you want Yemeni coffee, you're going to have to buy it, right?
Yeah, you have no choice, and there's not very much of it. So get in line, get your wallet ready, and belly up to the bar and buy some coffee, because it's really good.
We hear you, Marty. We hear you.